Let's go with Ashley Jost.
All right. I'd love to hear from the president and then from you, Curator Stillman, and Curator Chapman, about what you've already, I know you have short-term goals in mind. Have you guys already talked about any of them, kind of knowing that this was going to come out?
Let me take that first, because I'm not chairman yet. Marcy Graham is chairman.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is meet with Marcy Graham, Daryl Chapman, and the president, and get some input on what our short-term goals ought to be, what is doable, what is just minorly disruptive. And we're going to work with that as a consensus, I believe, the four of us.
But we've been talking about changes to the university since I arrived.
Right.
And the focus is really going to be on academic excellence, and that has to be the driving force. But to support it, we know that we have to make changes to the university. So we have to figure out what are the right changes that support that academic mission and priorities. Changes for change's sake causes entropy. And I think it's very important for us to focus on achieving academic excellence when it comes to student success, research breakthroughs, and engagement, the three pillars that we're known for. And I know that these three curators believe in that, and so do the others critically believe in that. So I'm excited. Yeah. So it'll be a continuation of that effort.
Yeah, we're looking forward, Dave and I are working forward to working with Moon and Marcy to develop that strategy. So I echo Moon's thoughts and Dave's.
You prepared to tackle him if you really have to?
I got a lot of moves. I'm not sure you can catch
I
me.
know that was a joke earlier.
He's a tough guy. Yeah.
I may need you for that.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Rudy?
Mr. Steelman, you got out in front of the entire board when the Melissa Click issue was being discussed, saying that she should be fired. You made a judgment in public on something that the board was going to consider in closed session. Do you think that is the proper role of a board member, to be announcing their decisions, their opinions about things that they may have to sit in judgment on?
The good thing about me is I'm not a hypocrite, so I will say that the answer is, if that happens while I'm chairman, I'm not going to find it particularly disruptive. I said in the comment yesterday that I think we need more public debate, not less. And in that particular case, I think you have to make judgment calls. I think that was controversial. I don't regret doing it. I regret the fact that Melissa Click lost her job, because she's a human being. But I think that our primary goal as curators and as leaders has to be the institution. And I felt that the inability to take meaningful action on that particular in that particular situation, if it was not addressed, was going to be damaging to the institution. And if your question is, will I do whatever in my judgment it takes to protect the institution, the University of Missouri, I will always do that.
And Dr. Choi, do you think it's appropriate for curators when there's a major controversial personnel issue that they're going to have to weigh in on, to weigh in publicly and to say what their decision is before they've heard everything?
So Rudy, I wasn't here at the time, but just judging from the lack of action that was taken with a faculty member who impeded journalists from doing their job, I think that action was very inappropriate. And I think perhaps going back, if I were to ask David, was there some frustration that you have for the lack of action that the university took against this serious matter? Probably he may say yes. I don't want to put our administrators or our curators in a position where the university is not taking appropriate action. And I would take the appropriate action so that we can, as much as we can, speak with one voice. But we have 9 curators who are all individuals, who care deeply, individually, for the university and its stakeholders. And there are going to be times where there are going to be differences of opinion. And I have to respect that, because that type of discourse, I think, is very important for a healthy board.
What does this mean for, Curator, you were close with the governor. Do you think that you being at the helm now of the governing board in 3 weeks, Does that affect in any way the relationship between the governor and the university system?
Well, I was going to answer a few questions, but I think it's very important to say that the Board of Curators is not a political board. We are in no way a political board. We all have had different relationships with chief executives in this state. Marcy Graham, I think, was and remains close to Jay Nixon, as did Don Cups, my dear friend. And we will use what we hope or what we know to interact and persuade the legislators and the governor of this state on the importance of the institution and the importance of public support. But I want to make it clear that we are in no way political.
Sure, I guess I'm asking that because unlike Jay Nixon, who absolutely did use higher ed in certain ways when it came to funding, Governor Greitens is doing it a little bit differently, and clearly right out the gate with withholds and cuts to higher ed, and then made some comments that necessarily weren't positive at all about higher ed. So, I don't know, that relationship just seems like it could be an interesting dynamic. He's specifically, in fact, said not positive things about the university, the flagship in particular, after the audit. So I guess that's sort of the context of why I was asking.
Well, I hope along with President Moon Choi that we can convince him that we are a great institution, that we are of critical importance to the state of Missouri, and that we are making the needed changes.
Do you have an update on the search for a new provost for the University of Missouri? Because I know along with that task force right now that's reviewing all of the academic programs, that's gonna, their full report's gonna come out in January, and then I know it's gonna be responsible for the provost's office later to decide, which academic programs could be cut. So can you talk about how, whether you have an update on the search, and then kind of how that transition with the provost's office is gonna work along with that academic analysis right now?
Well, thank you. So Chancellor Alexander Cartwright requested from the university community nominations to serve for individuals to serve as interim provost. And I believe over the next 2 weeks, I'm looking at Christian, that he will make that decision. He's received a lot of excellent nominations, but he's trying to identify a person who has very strong academic and research record, an individual who can make the difficult decisions that can support the reallocation of resources that we need to grow the academic enterprise. The search for the permanent provost, in my estimation, will probably begin in the new year, and it'll be a very collaborative process with significant faculty, student, and staff input. And he also hopes to conclude that search by the end of the spring term. And that's an aggressive timeline, but that's the timeline that we used for the chancellor search that resulted in Alex Cartwright.
So you said with the academic programs that you had be looking at possible elimination of programs or possibly adding new programs after that task force analysis in the spring. So is the interim provost going to be responsible for that? Is the new provost, if that concludes in the spring?
So the interim provost will play an important role, but this is a collaborative process where that decision is made that is a data-driven, data-informed, not data-driven, data-informed decision that also takes in the input of the program directors and the stakeholders. So it's not going to be done as an exercise that involves just the provost. I mean, this is going to be very inclusive. But the chancellor is also going to play a major role in this because he also recognizes that for the university to be able to grow the academic programs that we need to sustain, we have to have some reallocations. And there are going to be some tough decisions. But you've heard me and the curator say many times, we just can't be all things to all people. We just can't. But those programs that we want to continue, we want to ensure that they have the necessary support so that they achieve the excellence that we expect. Thank you. Yes?
Could you touch on the two management models that were talked about in the presentation and what that could look like going forward, as well as how it compares and contrasts to the way that things are already done?
So the two models that were discussed, one is the core management model, which involves a larger central organization, and that's not the organization that we have currently at the system. But there are nuances here that you may not have picked up, and that is that there's core management at the system level, but there's also core management at the campus level. So the core management at the campus level allows the central campus to be able to have activities that relate to human resources and IT that are centralized. So a core management model doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be absorbing all of those functions within the system. There has to be some level of autonomy on the campuses to be nimble enough to meet the needs of the campuses. I guess the best example of that is in procurement. Procurement is centralized at the system and also centralized at the campuses, and it actually runs very well. And the only, I guess, negative that I found in the report regarding procurement was not that the process wasn't efficient, but some of the items that were being purchased may have more features than we needed. And so that's the type of model that we're trying to pursue. And we're talking about basically the administrative structure. And so it's going to be a combination that we see between that core management and the other being strategic management, which means that we're going to be consolidating activities that help to save resources for the campuses, but also asking the campuses with the directions that we provide in terms of growing research, increasing graduation rate, lowering cost, that the chancellors can meet. But that kind of decision has to be made in concert with the campuses and the central office, including the curators. How about back there? Are you a student, reporter?
No, sir, I'm with St. Louis Public Radio.
Oh, okay. You have a question?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay. Ashley?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about whether or not there's really room to take this discussion about one shift versus 7 versus 5, 4, whatever, in the direction that we all know you'd like it to go in the coming year?
Well, I'll let Moon speak to that right now. What you said was the key word, is there room to take the discussion. I think it is a process, and I don't think there's any question that Dr. Choi has set up and PwC has set up that we're going to have that discussion. And then where it works out is going to be what Dr. Choi, in collaboration with the board, feels meets our needs the most.
And for me, having a stronger system is not the goal. The system is not recognized for its teaching or its research or its engagement. If we can have a stronger system that results in greater academic performance at the individual campuses, I believe that is the goal that we have. And as you saw from the administrative review, there are many missed opportunities. For example, if we had a common structure for PeopleSoft, we would be able to have better integration of students being able to transfer courses among the campuses, for students to take distance learning courses at any of the 4 campuses seamlessly and provide that information back to their home campuses. We can also have cases in which faculty members across the campuses can collaborate on research grants without having to consider, in some cases, having a subcontract between campuses. These are things that can make our system stronger. But any savings that we have as part of the administrative study is not going to grow the size of the administration at the system. That's not the purpose. We have to be able to pump that back into activities that faculty, staff, and students view as being important. And a very important objective for us this year is to provide a pool for merit increases. Our outstanding faculty and staff who work very diligently have not had raises at some of the campuses in 3 to 4 years. And they are very dedicated, but there comes a time when attractive offers come in and we are going to lose some of our top people. So we have to be able to recognize them. David? Marcy?
Yeah, Marcy?
No,
I want to say something a little bit about Marcy again, too, and Moon, because I don't think so much of this has been cultural and something that we on the board have felt that I don't know if it's readily apparent yet, even to close observers, really, like you and Ashley, let alone to the public, that the cultural changes that have been made in this board as a result of Marcy Graham. And it is those cultural changes that allow us to go forward, Ashley, with substantive discussions of matters like what are the proper role of centralized authority versus the campus. And none of that would even be possible to discuss under the old board that I came onto, and it's been made possible by Marcy Graham. And I don't think that it is really possible to overstate that importance.
What about the effort to really promote transparency that Marcy kind of created with the board discussion and all of that? Do you intend on carrying that through?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about. That is what has made these discussions possible. It is impossible to overstate the importance moving forward of the changes that have been made possible through Marcy Graham's leadership.
Yeah, I'd have to say too that when that started, David was either on board or out in front of those issues. He feels exactly like I do of the importance of transparency, and I think you'll see in the meetings ahead, much as I said yesterday, you're going to see more transparency and more open discussion. I think the public deserves that, and I think that makes for a healthier board. There are some things we have to discuss in private, but the more we can minimize that, the better the university will be, and the more confident the public will be in what we're doing.
Speaking of, I've got several questions that are on various topics, but speaking of transparency and calls and things that what you discuss in public and what you discuss in private. Yesterday during the meeting, you talked about calls between curators that discussing board business. Today, we had an entire press release about the new officers of the board that went out, boom, as soon as the election was done, as though it was well known, telegraphed in advance throughout the system, who the nominees were, that there were going to be no nominees, there's not going to be a split vote, there wasn't going to be a sudden change in the election outcome. Mm-hmm. How much of the discussion of who was going to be, Mr. Phillips was the vice chair of the board. Oftentimes boards take the vice chair and elevate them to the chairmanship. As office one, many organizations have a president-elect, and that is the person designated to become the next president. How much of the discussion as to who was going to get nominated occurred in calls between curators or in closed meetings of the Board of Curators?
Rudy, I know you don't mean to be sounding accusatory.
Well,
Well, look, we're a 9-person board. We talk all the time.
yeah, in real life, as you certainly understand, those are discussions as you come up till the end of a year, and there are discussions about who's interested and who's leading, who has commitments because of a change in their work habits or profession, don't have the time. This is a big commitment. This is a big commitment to be chair of the Board of Curators. So there's a lot of dynamics, and I think someone would be naive to think that the curators don't discuss that prior to the election.
There have been court rulings on what are called hub and spoke decision-making, where a centralized, where one or two people at the center makes calls to several others who are on the board that's making the decision, so that the decision is ironed out in advance, and that's been determined to be a violation of the Sunshine Law. Is that what we're talking about has been going on?
No.
No.
Then how did it occur that we had, that this decision seems to have been made without any other discussion, that suddenly Mr. Steelman is the chairman of the board?
Well, is anybody going to tell him it's because I'm so good looking?
I don't know what else to tell you, Rudy, other than what we've said. Clearly, for instance, I chaired the vote this morning. I had no idea who was going to second the nominations. I had an idea who might nominate someone because I'd been informed of that. But
How were you informed of that?
I heard it from someone.
From who?
No, I'm not going to discuss who I heard it
Wait a
from.
second, I want to talk about this, because I think we have to be transparent, but there's also some degree of pejorative attribution to the fact that 9 people who know each other and like each other have discussions, and those are not hub and spoke decisions. And there's always some sort of organicity to how any decisions are made by any boards, let alone a small board. And I haven't reviewed the hub and spoke decisions that you're talking about, but I've lived with the Sunshine Law my entire life, and I am absolutely confident that the Sunshine Law was not violated in any way in this election.
Well, I mean, you also discussed yesterday calls about other matters that are before the board, and is it, and we see a lot of unanimous votes. Are we having discussions of the matters that are in the public sessions of the board in private between curators and decisions made on how votes are gonna go before you come to the board meeting?
I don't think you have decisions, but yeah, we have a lot of discussions. We
know most
We
of
have hundreds of pages to go through.
We know all of the
yeah.
issues that are going to come before the board before we get here, well in advance, and study them.
As you know, the reports, materials for the board meetings are mailed out in advance, so
And you
people
see
can
it.
review
You
them.
see
You
it.
see them as well.
Yeah, but.
Right.
I see them generally on Tuesday before the.
Sure.
And, so when does the board receive the packets?
The board receives a packet at that time.
On the Tuesday?
At that
Same time you do.
yeah.
I can't say when I received it because I was in trial. I got to read it the night
Yeah.
before the board meeting.
But that's when they receive it, Rudy. And,
Okay, so my other questions
okay,
about other topics, you know, you all brought up, this is not a political board. You actually brought up your relationship with the current governor, your relationship with the past governor. How often do you talk to the governor about business on the board, and how often did you talk to Jay Nixon about business on the board?
I can answer that. I have never talked to Governor Greitens about business on the board.
I talked to him one time. He called me and he said, "I'm going to appoint you to the Board of Curators." And I said, "I'll be honored to accept." And he said, "If you get it, do a good job."
Okay.
Rudy,
And the final question.
we get a final question, and then we'll go to Alyssa.
It's to you, Dr. Choi. It's about the savings in this transformation program. A large portion of it is in the benefits area. Of this 44 million it's identified as the low end, 17.5 million is in the benefits area. There's been a lot of cutbacks in benefits, especially what retirees can expect. And if you want people here long-term and to do top quality people here long-term, are the retirement benefits aligned to that goal?
So as Breck Marshall, our PWC specialist mentioned, we're going to have to look at our overall compensation package. It includes salaries and benefits to be able to attract and retain the best people. But we're also very mindful of being good stewards of the resources that support our faculty and staff. As you know, there are many pension programs throughout the United States that are underwater. And I believe that this board, during the past 10 to 15 years, have made some very strategic decisions to ensure that our pension plans are sustainable. And we just made a very important change this year. That's going to cost the university another $20 million, primarily to support the pension plan so that it's sustainable. But at the same time, I would have to say that I do not want to promise employees, new employees, that we're going to have a certain pension plan that's going to be available to them when I can't realistically believe that we can sustain it. So we're just trying to be very transparent in this process, recognizing that if there is a dip in the market, that's going to affect our pension plan, and it's going to affect our ability to meet the current obligation if we don't make any changes. And we owe it to the retirees who are retired to make sure that we have a sustainable pension model. Rudy, let's go to Alyssa.
Turning back to that activity analysis that you said is now kind of part 2 after this administrative review, and I understand that ultimately, like you had just said, that you want to put some of this money that's saved back into faculty and staff. This administrative and activity analysis could make the life better for a lot of faculty and staff. But
That's
I think
right.
it also might be fair to say that some people, you know, when you talk about activity analysis and figuring out who exactly does what, when there were a lot of job cuts in the springtime, might have concerns about their jobs. Can you speak to those possible concerns a little?
Yeah, well, I think it's too early for us to say what the activities analysis would tell us, but I can understand why employees will consider that this may mean some job actions. But it's really important for us to note that by cutting one area of our operation that causes duplication doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be having job actions that result from it. For example, if we have multiple individuals in a unit that handles IT, HR, and finance, but we can do it more effectively by centralizing that at the campus and allowing those individuals who used to do some of that work as a hobby to focus on other activities. And it may be related to student advising. It may be related to counseling and mental health. We have other needs at the university that can be met by reallocating the labor that we have currently as well. But I was very open with the community when I said back in March that over the next 3 months, we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions, and people will lose jobs. And it was very unfortunate, the 450 to 500 people who lost their jobs, and David mentioned that as well. We care about our faculty and staff. We don't want to have to make those decisions. But at the same time, we owe it to our students and the state to have a sustainable model. We knew that with the budget cuts, we didn't have a sustainable model. And with this, I think we can get more resources to support the priorities that we have. But I can't say at this point how many, what the job actions are going to be. But we're also going through this with the mindset that we want to find every opportunity for our staff members to have other responsibilities within the university. Thank you.
On the same point.
Oh, by the way, it may also mean that currently open positions may not be filled, which doesn't result in a job action, but that work can be distributed elsewhere. Yes. Oh, can I ask, Ryan Rapp is leading that study. Ryan?
I'll just add, we get to the back point. The staff council members who participated on the administrative review were the ones who asked. They actually requested that we do the work survey, because part of it is to really understand what people are doing. We can look at job titles, but they felt like that wouldn't actually inform us. So we actually had staff council members who said, if you're gonna look at what we're doing, we actually wanna be able to tell you. So it's, while I think I can understand there can be some apprehension, it was actually driven through that process that we arrived at it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know you love being on campus.
Yeah.
He does. He does. Yes.
Dr. Troy, you
Yes.
spoke several times about the need for data to go into any decision-making. Could you touch on in more detail what role that will play and what kind of things you're going to look at for that?
So when it comes to the academic portfolio review, data is going to be very important. We're going to be examining, for example, the number of students that graduate from a program. We have to maintain a certain level that is higher than the MDHE threshold for us to maintain programs. But even those programs that are above that threshold, we have to ask the questions of the academic quality. What are our students doing in those programs? Are they being gainfully employed in their discipline? Or are there programs that we can perhaps consolidate to create a better learning experience in certain programs? So it's going to be data-informed, not data-driven, data-informed with the quality metrics that we look for at an academic institution.
So as far as next steps after the administrative review specifically, could you speak in more detail about what's going to go into the next step of that? How will the decisions be made? What's going to be looked at? And I'd also like to hear more about the survey that will be given to staff.
So can I ask Ryan if he can answer that question? In terms of the next steps, we're at the initial stage, as you saw. The next step will include the activity analysis for all system employees. And based on that, we have to look at then the analytics that come from it, and to really ask the question, are we overstaffed in some of these functions? And can we consolidate some of these functions centrally within the campus and within the system? Ryan?
I think the next steps, to just add to that, it is the activity analysis. It's also integrating the results of this with our other campuses. And it's working to support our transition management office. But I do want to be clear, the transition management office will be established with our current resources. They're not expanding administration to stand this up. It'll be done with those resources we already have.
And you mentioned during the presentation that steps would be taken in summer 2018. So when will this next step in the process begin to take place?
I think the activities analysis will be finished by the spring, but as Ryan mentioned before, we're not waiting to take action. There are going to be certain areas where it's going to be obvious that there are solutions to be had. The sooner that we can realize the annual cost savings, it's sooner that we have resources available to invest in the academic priorities. So by the summer of 2018, we'll have a very good comprehensive, I believe, Ryan, approach to use the activities analysis data and to have the actions that we can have in all of those categories, from facilities all the way down to finance. Good question. Ashley?
I changed the subject a little.
Yeah.
For something else I'm working on, I'd love to get anyone's input on this. How do you plan on leveraging, I think we've heard this a little bit in a couple of meetings, but leveraging the role of extension in changing the perception of the university and the, you are all nodding
That's a good question.
simultaneously.
Let's
Here-
get that-
In the eyes of the
You wanna
public,
take that?
and how has that kind of changed over the last year or two?
Our view of extension?
Yeah.
And how we can use it? Well, we've got great extension personnel. Marshall Stewart is fantastic. And I think Marshall's, from our presentation in UMKC, he gave a great detailed analysis of what he's been doing moving forward, how he's developing programs and working with people to expand the reach of MU. So I think some of that is still in development. I think he's got some concrete avenues that he's going to use, or methods that he's going to use to keep that outreach going. But I think we've reached people in places that we haven't in previous years under previous leadership. So I think leveraging Marshall as best as we can would be one of the best things we can do, especially to get our enrollment numbers up, to just let people know all the great things that we're doing.
I have an idea just because I'm way too intrigued by higher education, but can you, in your own words, say how extension can influence and help grow enrollment?
Sure. I think that one thing that I think Moon is great at is, and Marcy and David as well, is building relationships with people. I think there was a while there where we had some relationship issues with our constituents in the state. And I think we've got offices maybe in every county in the state, very close to it if we don't. And one way to build those relationships is to be seen, shake hands, go to high schools, talk to folks. And I think that's very important. So using extension to do that is a great method to get that done and to build those relationships back with those people throughout Missouri. There's strong competition in higher ed in this state, and we've got to be better than everyone else, and we've got to have better relationships than everyone else as well.
Great answer. So Marshall is also thinking about expanding extension to include engagement. So the traditional model of having extension focusing just through the extension office on areas of agriculture support or 4-H is being expanded so that we can offer distance learning courses, tutoring for students, STEM education for rural parts of the state, as well as telemedicine opportunities that are possible. And in this state where there's significant opioid addiction problems, the extension is playing a leading role working with the state to educate those students or those adults that are being afflicted by the opioid crisis. So their reach has really been expanded.
And he's expanded it beyond, traditionally it's been mainly agricultural based. And I can appreciate that, being a CAFNA graduate and working with the Department of Ag now. And he hasn't taken away from that. We're still doing the important work we need to do in agriculture, but he's expanded it in ways that I never thought was possible. So I'm really proud of that work.
Good.
Yeah.
Probably one last question.
Yeah, we need to get back.
Rudy? All right.
Look, you got a smile out of Rudy.
He's actually a nice person. I've got to know him.
I've known him longer than you have.
All right.
I'm piggybacking off of that
Yeah.
extension. The one thing that Marshall Stewart said in his last presentation was talking about the need for broadband access across the state. With your relationship with the governor, is that something that you would maybe try to talk to the governor about, try to explain to him the need for that broadband access? Because Dr. Stewart was saying, we can't be successful unless we get broadband access across our state.
That's a great question, because I will tell you that relationship, if it has not happened, it will soon happen. I believe that Marshall and Drew Erdman, if they haven't talked already, will be talking.
No, they have.
Broadband is a critical element to both the governor and the university and to the state of Missouri, and it is a perfect place where we can work together with a lot of people and make it happen. And the interesting thing about broadband is when Darrell talks about how you expand the reach of extension and how it's more than just agriculture, broadband access is a problem not just in rural Missouri, but in areas of the north side of the city of St. Louis. And so this is a perfect place where we can extend our reach and show our value to the state of Missouri and to the governor's office.
And you mentioned Curator Phillips. He's become a leader on behalf of the board in the broadband effort.
Excellent. Just last comment. Marcy Graham has been such a supportive leader, not just to me, but to the general officers, and we're going to miss work. Well, you're still going to be on the
I'm
board.
gonna be around.
But I'm looking forward to working with David and Darrell. Sometimes I forget that they have full-time jobs. They are so engaged with the university, so we appreciate all of the dedication. Thank you. With that, we have to go back to the meeting.